In the summer of 79 AD, a mountain that hadn't moved in centuries woke up. It gave warnings. The ground shook. Wells ran dry. Fish washed up dead on the shore. And the people of the Bay of Naples, Romans, most of them wealthy ones, looked at those warnings and went about their day. They had no reason to think otherwise. The mountain had been quiet for so long that no one alive remembered what it was capable of. They had villas on its slopes, vineyards fed by its mineral-rich soil, children who had grown up in its shadow and never been afraid. Then, at around 1 in the afternoon, it exploded. What followed over the next 18 hours would become one of the most documented disasters in the ancient world, and one of the most misunderstood. Because for nearly 2 centuries, archaeologists believed they had found all the bodies. They thought most people escaped. They were wrong. The city was called Herculaneum, named, according to legend, for Hercules himself. It sat on a bluff above the Bay of Naples, 5 miles from the peak of Vesuvius. It was not a large city, perhaps 5,000 people, but it was a wealthy one. Marble colonnades, multi-story townhouses with frescoed walls, public baths so well preserved that the hypocaust heating system still sits intact today. Roman elites came here in the summer to escape the heat of the capital. Cicero had a villa nearby. The air was good, the fish were fresh, the views were extraordinary. The eruption column reached about 20 miles into the sky. For several hours, Herculaneum was actually spared the worst of it. The prevailing wind pushed the ash cloud southeast, toward Pompeii. Herculaneum got lucky with the wind direction, so people ran. The sensible ones, anyway. The streets emptied. Families grabbed what they could carry and fled north toward Naples. Merchants left their shops mid-transaction. The city, by early evening, was largely abandoned, but not entirely. Some people couldn't run, or wouldn't. They gathered at the waterfront in a row of vaulted stone chambers built into the seawall. Boathouses, probably. Storage for the vessels that worked the bay. The arches were thick and sturdy, and there was a faint hope. Perhaps rescuers would come by sea. Pliny the Elder, the famous Roman commander and naturalist, had in fact launched a rescue fleet from across the bay. He saw the eruption column. He sailed toward it, so they waited in the boathouses, in the dark, listening to the mountain. Then, at approximately 1 in the morning, something changed. The eruption entered its second phase. The column, which had been shooting material miles into the sky, became too heavy to sustain itself. It collapsed, and when an eruption column collapses, the gases and ash that had been rising begin to rush outward instead. Down the mountainside, across the ground. This is called a pyroclastic surge. The first surge hit Herculaneum at around 160 kilometers per hour. Inside the boathouses, the temperature reached somewhere near 500 degrees Celsius in the space of a fraction of a second. Not hot enough to incinerate the bodies, hot enough to vaporize skin, hot enough to cause muscles to contract violently, which is why many of the skeletons found here appear to be in poses of physical struggle, limbs drawn in, fists clenched. They weren't struggling. They were already dead. The heat was simply moving their bodies. Brains boiled, skulls cracked. A 7 months pregnant woman had curled her body around her child in the final seconds. A soldier carried a carpenter's tools and a bag of surgical instruments, presumably sent on the rescue mission Pliny had ordered. A woman wearing 2 rings on one hand was found exactly as she fell. Within minutes, 6 successive surges buried the entire city under more than 20 meters of volcanic material. Not ash, hardened pyroclastic rock, solid enough that a town would eventually be built directly on top of it. And then, silence. The people of Herculaneum were gone. The city was gone. And over the following decades, then centuries, the memory of where it had been slowly faded. Pompeii, larger, more famous, was at least occasionally mentioned in Roman texts. Herculaneum was simply forgotten. The ground above it changed hands. Farms appeared. Eventually, a town. For 1,630 years, nobody knew it was there. In 1709, a farmer named Ambrogio Nocerino was digging a well near the town that is now called Herculaneum. His shovel struck something hard. He dug further. It was marble. Beautifully carved marble, unlike anything found in a field. He sold it. The man who bought it worked for an Austrian military commander called the Prince d'Elbeuf, who was building a palace nearby and wanted decorations. The prince dug deeper. He found more marble, then statues, then columns, then, eventually, an entire theater, intact, sealed, perfectly preserved under decades of Roman occupation, and then centuries of volcanic rock. He wasn't an archaeologist. He looted it, stripped what he wanted and sold the rest. Many of the artifacts ended up decorating aristocratic homes across Europe. Some are still there, but the location was now known. And in 1738, the King of Naples ordered a proper excavation. What they found was astonishing. The walls still had their paint. The wooden furniture hadn't rotted. It had carbonized but held its shape. Bread was still in the ovens. Wine still sat in sealed amphorae. Figs, olives, an entire library of philosophical scrolls, rolled up, preserved in carbon form, now slowly being decoded with X-ray technology. But here's what they didn't find. Bodies. A few, scattered across the city. But for 200 years of excavation, the overwhelming absence of human remains led archaeologists to one logical conclusion: that the people of Herculaneum had escaped. That the early warning, the favorable wind, the hours between the eruption's start and its deadly second phase had given them time to flee. That story held until 1982. That year, excavators working along what had once been the ancient shoreline began clearing an area near the old boathouses. And they found a skeleton, then another, then dozens. Then, as the area expanded over the following decade, they found roughly 340 people still huddled in the same stone chambers where they had taken shelter nearly 2,000 years before. They had not escaped. They had waited, and the wait had cost them everything. The details that emerged from those skeletons changed what we know about Herculaneum, about Vesuvius, and about the eruption itself. DNA analysis revealed extraordinary genetic diversity. The population was better nourished than most of the ancient world. The men showed signs of heavy labor from childhood. A significant portion of the population showed healed injuries, recovered illnesses, evidence of medical care. These were not abstractions. They were people. One scholar described it as reading a diary written in bone. Vesuvius is still there, still active, still closely monitored by Italian authorities. The current best estimates suggest that roughly 700,000 people now live within what volcanologists call the high-risk zone. The mountain hasn't erupted since 1944. And just as in 79 AD, the people who live closest to it go about their day. Schools, markets, traffic. In the shadow of something that could, without much warning at all, wake up again. We dig into stories like this every week. If that sounds good, subscribe.